Greetings. It is the 25th of June, and we're delighted to have you with us. This is the People-Centered Internet, and delighted to have you as a member of our community. Today, we have a special guest that was brought to us by Schneider Alfonso, our own Schneider. Sean Coe is here, and we're just really happy to have you. We're very interested in the technology that you're birthing. And I'm going to turn it over to Schneider to, introduce Sean a little bit more. And I'll just remind you, we're recording. So if you've got objections to being recorded, it'd be a good time to drop off or just stay on mute and blank your screen. And if you have questions, put them into chat, and I'll call on you in order when we get to the Q&A section of our session. With that, delighted to have you with us, Sean. Schneider, over to you.
Great, thank you. And yeah, welcome everybody. I'm very, very glad to introduce Shanko, or as he likes to be called, Scott. He invents a proof of reception, or POR, which is the conversation of what he will share with us today. And he's an expert in cross-border transactions across finance, technology, infrastructure, media, and entertainment. That's something very interesting. And he has produced, written, and performed music throughout the world. Through his family office, Koherent Incorporated, he has co-chaired a number of iconic summits for the United Nations, for the web, and other international communities. So yeah, with that brief, I will just pass the mic to Scott, so he can just take the floor. Welcome, Scott, to the People-Centered Internet community.
Thank you so much. It's an honor. I'm very humbled and privileged to be here with all of you today. I'm going to share my screen so I could dive into some slides. Stop. Clear this up. So today I'll be introducing a new technology called proof of reception. Proof of reception is an edge validation protocol or data standard. I come from a lineage of different inventors. One of the most notable inventions is HDMI technology, which we're using right now. So from a young age, I've had this burning desire to create something of my own and provide value for humans all around the world. So similar to how HDMI standardizes content from the studio all the way to your personal devices, proof of reception is a standardization of data across various repositories so that we can validate our own transactions on the edge, leveraging this new paradigm. In terms of proof of reception's organization, we have created what's called the Web Trinity Foundation. And the Web Trinity Foundation is mandated with the task of devolution reversal. Unfortunately, due to how transactions have been validated online, our online identity and relationships are very inferior and no more sophisticated than a creature being controlled by third-party algorithms and third-party corporates, whereas we have essentially no freedom, no control, no validation of our own transactions. So over the last 2.5 years or so, we've been able to achieve the purpose of creating a better internet built on our human intelligence, that's HI instead of AI, through proving human reception of true value. Schneider was kind enough to provide an introduction of myself. So as he mentioned, I also go by ESCO. ESCO is an acronym. It stands for Every Situation Can Offer Hope. Started in my music career, doing a lot of music from South Korea. You may be familiar with K-pop. I was also one of the cross-border experts to commercialize Ethereum and other decentralized protocols into Asia. And then that's when I realized that even blockchain and even cryptocurrencies, they do innately have a third-party middleman, such as in proof of work, they have miners. In proof of stake, they have stakers. And unfortunately, despite the lofty goals of Web3 and blockchain, it really hasn't decentralized the internet as it set out to do. And that's when I went back to the drawing board and invented proof of reception. So just to clarify before I go further, proof of reception has nothing to do with blockchain, has nothing to do with cryptocurrency or Web3. It's just an edge validation protocol where our HI or human intelligence can validate transactions. The reason that proof of reception is so opportune in this moment in history is because of how transactions have been validated over the last 40 years or so. Unfortunately, even though us as humans drive the identities and values that accumulate to $100 trillion worth of value across the world economy, the power of validation and the monetization, of all these values primarily is capitalized, within third-party corporations. So despite, us kind of being the raw material supplier into this online data paradigm, which is the world economy, unfortunately, despite our fundamental role in providing all this value, obviously, if we didn't get involved in any transaction or our relationships didn't exist, we wouldn't be able to drive the market caps of these companies because they would have no customers, they would have no transactions. Despite our fundamental input into this world economy, unfortunately, due to how transactions are validated, we are trapped. In other words, our online identities are owned, controlled, and violated by some sort of artificial intelligence or AI on the behalf, of a large institution or corporation. And to articulate, this paradigm, if we want to engage in financial instruments, we need to log into a financial platform. The database that controls that network controls the relationship between buyers and sellers who are kind of succumbing to that third-party validation. When we engage in content like video, we need to log into Netflix, YouTube, and other streaming platforms. And that platform and third-party validation is what controls the relationship between producers of content and consumers of content. And you see this virtually everywhere across every transaction, that we are trapped in these artificial prisons that are created by third-party validation systems on the behalf of corporations. The primary reason for that lies in what's called the power of validation. So naturally, whomever controls the validation in a network eventually is in control of that network. So up to date, recently, it's been technology and AI that enables kind of our humanity to become imprisoned and subservient to the AI that controls our online interactions. However, proof of reception provides an alternate paradigm where companies can operate more ethically and even save a lot of money by running more efficiently to enable customers and users to customize their humanity or HI based on proof of reception's suite of software solutions to customize technology so that our values can be customized with conditions by which we want our personal portions, as we call them, to be transacted with other ports in our network. And the way that we do that is we've modeled proof of reception based on the ancient human intelligence found in human bartering. So even before modern fiat currencies, our ancestors would do a one-to-one self-validation of each other's asset. If the counterparty has the value that I want, and I have the value that the counterparty wants, we can instantaneously swap those values, and it's the reception on both ends that ultimately provides finality to the transaction. So similarly with POR's algorithm, we have a one-to-one lock, similar to this, example of our ancestors. We have edge validation of each other's value. Even if it's on a third-party repository, we can still validate the money, the content, whatever that metadata represents. And then once we execute the transfer, the reception on both ends provides finality. And literally since the beginning of this presentation, our proof of reception of information from one another naturally records information in our human database, which is our mind. So whatever I'm sharing with you, your reception of that information in real time is storing that in your mind as a memory. So this is kind of the biological, natural proof of reception happening, and is the innate validation protocol of our humanity and all nature as well. And information is just one of many values. So the more we receive value that we want, accuracy of proof of reception, quickly, speed of proof of reception, and often frequency of proof of reception from one another, the more we trust one another. So in other words, trust equals proof of reception times accuracy plus speed plus frequency. Now, if we think back to our human experience since we were born, the reason that we trust, our family or friends or colleagues or other people in our network is because over time, we've received the value that we wanted from each other with accuracy, speed, and frequency. And now that we have this way of creating relative trust algorithmically, we no longer need to kind of blindly trust a third party that can exploit that relationship prior to this current paradigm. Now, because of the uniqueness of my invention, I worked with Fish & Richardson, which is a leading IP law firm in the world. They're notable for patenting the light bulb for Thomas Edison, the telephone for Alexander Graham Bell, and the aircraft for the Wright brothers. And after doing a global conflict check, they kind of validated the uniqueness of my invention. And our mission is literally to, as a 501c3, to empower, protect the identity, time, and skill of 8 billion humans, essentially ending the online trafficking of our humanity once and for all. We already know that in the real world that human trafficking is horrible. Well, online, because there's no alternative to validate transactions, our hope is that everyone can be free online, as most of us are in the real world. Now I'll touch upon, the tech stack of proof of reception. So first, we have what's called portions, and everything in POR has this POR nomenclature. So portions represent values, and we all have values online. They could be, music or content or media. They could be money sitting in the banking network represented in our bank accounts across different bank systems, some credentials from third-party databases, our biometrics, which we could input on the edge and is secured on our security enclave chip, our geolocation, and so forth and so on. So generally, what we call values online are portions, and these portions are essentially data records that represent the values that we have. Portraits are POR traits. So kind of spreading those two words apart, POR traits, they're the traits of POR or conditions by which we want to pre-program or customize our values to be exchanged with a counterparty. We may want to have, our content to be exchanged for money. We may want to have our money exchanged for some type of good or service. So these kind of things are called portraits. Now, in order for us to integrate, other systems outside of our personal repositories, we have what's called portals. So portals or port access links allow us to connect into the banking infrastructure so that we can prove to one another and transfer our money on the edge. We can also plug in portals or APIs, application programming interfaces, into different databases that control various values. And we also have portals directly into our device where we can have different inputs from the edge for validation as well. And the last component we have here is called a port. Port stands for Proof of Reception Terminal, and that allows us to essentially control all of our values via portals across any repository and leverage POR's edge validation of portraits to essentially validate transactions on a peer-to-peer basis. Over the last 2.5 years, we've scaled a number of use cases, providing more security, efficiency, and sustainability for a number of different what we call market makers across different industries and geographies. And here's a more technical overview of proof of reception to kind of reinforce what we have created. We've created essentially a WOW infrastructure, which stands for Wallet of Wallets, where now not only your money, but all of your humanity online is now at your control, at your validation, according to your preferences. And once again, we have the port, the proof of reception terminal. The portals are able to portion all of our values across different repositories. We're able to create portraits, conditions that we pre-program into our different values. And then we also have a local immutable database called a report that keeps track of our proof of receptions with other ports so that we can generate that trust algorithm or that reception score so that we have a history of how many proof of receptions we've done, how timely were they, how quickly we've done them, how accurately we've done them, how often we've done them, and so forth and so on. So in terms of kind of some notable portals we have, we're partners, with various kind of banking APIs, and we're plugged into over 12,000 financial institutions. So you can pair your money reception with any good service or asset ownership. And here's a deeper dive into the portraits. We have 12 templated portraits or conditions you can select, but you can kind of create unlimited conditions as you see fit. Now, I want to kind of highlight a couple of different case studies that really allows us to demonstrate how proof reception is solving problems in the real world. I'm sure all of you are very charitable, altruistic people, and you've donated money to a charity before. However, due to the third-party validation of our charitable contributions, the United Nations estimates that close to 50% of all charitable donations, amounting to billions of dollars, including humanitarian aid, never reach their intended recipient. So what we set out to solve in 2021 was figuring out a better way to customize proof of reception to allow the person in need, in this case, single mothers in New York City, to self-validate their credentials to get the humanitarian aid directly from the donor. And because of my background in entertainment, I'm connected with a lot of celebrities who also have good hearts like yours. And for this first use case, I worked with Angela Simmons. Her family is known for commercializing hip hop. If you know the popular hip hop group Run DMC, Joey Simmons is her father. So she's very plugged into that community, and she has 8 million followers online. And the beauty of proof of reception's protocol is because how retrofittable we are with portals or APIs, we can read data, from any third-party system, including Instagram or social media pages. So in this case, Angela Simmons was able to portion a Target gift card. She created portraits to say she wanted a selfie video from a single mother sharing the needs of herself and her children. We added additional portraits like, the single mother's ID, and other validation requirements from the edge. And this was a very simple kind of demonstration. So we didn't want to kind of overload the validation requirements or portraits. But needless to say, we had thousands of single mothers that were able to self-validate their needs and their credentials, and we were able to customize a Target gift card in their name so that they can walk into a Target store and use that credit for much needed resources for themselves and their children during the pandemic. And Target really loved this because we were bringing foot traffic into their store as well, and also giving them some positive goodwill. Since then, I'm also involved with the United Nations. I advise 200 different countries on adopting different innovations to accomplish the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In this use case, as you may remember, abruptly there was a Russian invasion of Ukraine. However, despite billions of dollars going to the Ukrainian government, unfortunately, in some instances, a lot of Ukrainian refugees did not receive that aid. And in order to provide an alternate paradigm for these refugees who fortunately had a device, we enabled them to portion GPS from their phone to prove that their live location is indeed in Ukraine. Any government-issued ID or NGO ID tied to their biometric on their phone. If they had Face ID capability on their hardware, we could tie that to their government ID. Also, they were able to portion their payment account. At the time, TransferWise or Wise was the only payment rail that was working because even banks were shut down. So we were able to leverage their unique credentials to confirm their payment account. And in some instances, we also had these heartbreaking emotional videos of refugees crying out for help while they were kind of bunkered down, and you can hear bombs exploding in the background. And we're kind of sharing these examples to the public so that we can get aid to them, and they've consented to that as well. So upon proof of reception of their credentials from the edge, now donations within the cash donors' accounts can automatically flow to the refugees. And here I want to point out what we like to call transactional chemistry, where portions have another pronunciation where port ions, when portions are programmed with portraits, they're essentially charged or portrayed, as we call it, where now values like money and credentials can automatically match one another in real time, giving more free time for us to go about our real lives without doing tedious tasks. So if you
How were the individuals identified? You're talking about the credentialing. How were they credentialed?
So in some instances, they have their government issued ID, and that API can confirm that the biometric that they input, if you have iPhone, you have Face ID, is matching that government issued ID.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So if you go to proofreception.org, this is just, POR use case that we just donated to various humanitarian organizations. However, fortunately, as a byproduct of that, now we're being utilized and have a lot of increasing demand to really get rid of deep fakes and AI spoofs, because just like we're able to validate the identity of refugees, we can use the same methodology with POR to validate that the person that you're communicating with online or the content that you're consuming online is authentic and originated by the person in that video or in that communication. So currently, generative AI, there's a big boom around it. However, there's a number of notable problems. So first and foremost, there's an environmental pollution problem. The beauty with proof of reception is all of the POR computing is happening on the edge device. So we don't need to have large-scale data centers that are kind of running these large AI models and inputting and ingesting everything across the internet, which naturally requires more computing, requires more electricity, generates more pollution. So we are focusing on generative HI on the edge, focused on our own personal profile. So on our edge, our personal profile, our personal input, it's a very minimal data set, but it's a very targeted, specific data set. So we're solving that issue. In terms of the intellectual property problem, right now there's a gray area whether all these large tech firms are ethically sourcing, their inputs. And a lot of Hollywood actors and creators have, have kind of created like protests around it, but essentially it's still a gray area. And now with POR, we can kind of create a new paradigm where our human consent is tied to what we call our vitals, our video, image, text, audio, location signature, all our inputs into our phone, so that in the future, hopefully, these multi-billion-dollar tech companies can now license our inputs directly from us on the edge, rather than kind of stealing or misappropriating online content about us. Also, we feel that it will provide better output, because right now, the data being ingested by these large AI models are very outdated, sometimes years outdated. So naturally you have bad input, bad output. But if we have real-time inputs from the edge with our ports, that's going to provide better, more actionable outputs and provide, a more premium data set that we can charge for leveraging POR. So that's why we really kind of are starting to create this small language model on the edge with POR's protocol, allowing the validation as well. In addition to, pointing out AI spoof and deepfakes, we also are talking to, other use cases where we can like point out bots across social media, messaging, content, and ticketing. You may remember the headlines around the Taylor Swift ticket sale, how bots were able to buy all the tickets instantaneously. And then the owners of the bots were able to sell those tickets for thousands of dollars, much higher than the market price. And then you had a lot of these parents and a lot of these Taylor Swift fans, very distressed. And eventually US Congress got involved, and they're still trying to solve it from a regulatory point of view, but we can solve it from a technical point of view where a ticket can only be sold to an authentic human fan that validates their identity. We can even take it a step further. Certain premium tickets can only be offered to fans that can input their social media data to prove that they are a super fan. They're liking all of Taylor Swift's stuff, they're reposting it, and so forth and so on. So you can kind of gamify fandom, if you will. Now in the world of entertainment, me being a creator, unfortunately, a lot of creators online are also in these artificial prisons of third-party streaming platforms. Believe it or not, Spotify and all these different platforms only pay a fraction of a penny per stream, where in our case, we're able to create a new paradigm where we can even circumvent the Ticketmasters and Spotifys of the world and allow creators to transact directly with their fans. So here's an example of this happening within Instagram, where you can kind of see this product, in this case, the VIP pass, from a very famous hip hop artist, where he is kind of promoting his good or service. And then instantaneously, you can, as a fan, engage in this product. So instead of getting a fraction of a penny for their content, now creators can get $500 deposited into their bank account and then automatically provide ownership to this exclusive content or this exclusive premium item for super fans. So now artists can make a living even though if they don't have millions of fans like the superstars. So in a nutshell, what we're doing is, instead of this previous paradigm where we've had these artificial prisons around our human identity and our relationship, in contrast, we're allowing the relationship to sit at the center of the transaction. We're allowing now portions within the databases where they reside to move around the human relationship. So a good illustration of this is this scene from Matrix, which a lot of people are normally familiar with, where you see this portal or API. It's being called by this port. He's putting in the portraits, saying what he needs. He's putting in the contract. And then the portal is able to bring the values around the two ports where the relationship is at the center. So this is just a visual illustration of what's happening on the back end with POR. Now we can kind of defy the laws of physics in a digital realm because, data can move ubiquitously around us. This is a little bit of a wordplay, but in the physical world, we have many ships that connect value across many ports. But in the portable world, we only need one ship between each port of our humanity, and that's the relationship. So as long as you have a relationship with someone, now you can validate your own transactions leveraging this new protocol. And our goal has been to enable legacy infrastructure and institutions to innovate their systems. We're not here to disrupt anything. We're not here to replace anything. We're here to empower the governments, institutions, and banks to provide a human rights-based approach to data. We are the generators of our own data, so we should have a human rights approach to incentivize and to enable ourselves to validate our own data. And to take a deeper dive into Web Trinity, we have an acronym here. That's why it's spelled in a kind of funky way. We have 3NITI, and it stands for the principles that we embody. So 3N is natural, necessary nourishment. We believe that people are dying from starvation and preventable causes because the validation of food and other necessities are not validated efficiently. There's all this food waste in America, but for some reason, somebody's dying from starvation in Africa. So natural, necessary nourishment are the 3 Ns. Intrinsic, innovative intelligence. So as you can see in proof of reception, our innate human validation protocol is what we are glorifying, and it is what we are customizing to provide transactions online. Transformational, truthful transparency. So now instead of blindly trusting a third party, we can pre-validate each other's value and have that transformational, truthful transparency. And finally, international inclusive interoperability. So no matter where you are in the world, because data is ubiquitous, data has no boundaries, we can now validate data across borders and provide transactions for 8 billion humans around the world to achieve our mission to free, empower, and protect the humanity of 8 billion humans online. And some of these humanitarian use cases have extended into what the United Nations categorizes as small island developing states, or the SIDS, S-I-D-S. So one of our kind of early conversations with the former president of Dominican Republic is to provide local security for data transactions in Dominican Republic and other small island developing states, where imagine imports and exports and domestic transactions, buyers and sellers can now validate money transfer upon proof of reception of that commodity, which can be confirmed by GPS or QR code logging at the destination. It really gets rid of a lot of the friction and a lot of the unnecessary cost and risk and third-party exploitation among small businesses within the Dominican Republic. And we also want this to have a trickle-down effect for villagers who are unbanked. I'll highlight this a little bit later in our SDG use case, but essentially, even though villagers, don't have a bank account in a lot of these different countries, they have somehow they have access to a device. So we are hoping for a future paradigm where we can kind of take our humanity and create it into our own currency. Where let's say that there's a poor villager who has no money, and the villager is very hungry, but they have no money to buy food. Well, they can barter their labor in terms of washing dishes, and a restaurant in their vicinity can leverage POR to connect with them. And this is just manual POR, there's no automation here. But in this case, the restaurant can save money on operating expenses and find a sustainable way to get rid of food waste by bartering the washing dishes for a hot meal. So in the future, our goal is to enable all humans to leverage their humanity to climb out of poverty, survive, and eventually thrive. Now, in terms of our go-to-market strategy, within the corporate world, we have two different types of products. We have the retail port. This is the 8 billion ports that we're donating to all humans. Essentially, it's a network that connects you with other ports, and it's one free port for each human. And it's this freemium model where you can kind of go back to this use case of using your humanity to self-barter as long as we're able to connect you with the proper counterparty. Now, if you want to get into more sophisticated transactions, like the content transactions I highlighted, or some financial use cases, which I'll highlight in a moment in capital markets, you can upgrade, to different modules and different portals that allow you to do some of these more sophisticated transactions at a fraction of a cost in terms of what you're giving to companies currently, including your own data. However, the limitation of each retail port is one simultaneous transaction. So you can only do one POR at a time. So if you're a large institution or an organization that has thousands or millions of customers, obviously you need many ports because you can't just do one transaction at a time. You may have to multitask thousands or millions of transactions at a time. And that's where we enter institutional portfolio. Portfolio stands for POR transaction folder input output, essentially an outsourced validation network that you can enable your customers, your users, or your members to self-validate transactions while protecting their data onto your corporate database. And with portfolios, we've been able to save millions of dollars for companies with the most strict data regulation. So I'm sure you've heard of GDPR in Europe or CCPA in California. It's becoming increasingly more expensive for companies to manage data, validate data, and protect data on the behalf of their customers. And we remove that headache altogether, along with the millions of dollars of compliance fees that companies need to afford. And some big tech companies, they just rather pay a fine, but not every small business or medium business can afford that. So now we're able to reduce the cost of data compliance by outsourcing data validation to the customer's interface. So let's say that I'm selling a widget. Instead of me managing the credit card details of my widget buyers, upon proof reception of money within the separate banking system from my customer to me, now I can authorize the transfer of that widget, whether it's physical or digital, to that end customer. And we provide utmost security because there's no more on-ramps or off-ramps that could be manipulated. We're just reading reception within the banking network to automate a database, e-commerce database, to affect a transaction. Now, this is something that was put together by some of our colleagues from Google Cloud. But even on the back end, we might not be aware of what's going on behind the computer screen. But for an e-commerce transaction, because there's so many third-party vendors and validation services, minimally it takes 13 or more steps to authenticate a transaction. And with each step, you're exposing the data and exposing the identity to a third-party service provider, creating attack vectors. With proof of reception, now we can allow everything to happen within 4 or less steps because everything's happening on the edge, everything's secured. And by doing so, we're starting to provide transaction efficiency in the realm of 50 to 95%. Imagine you can outsource all of your transaction validation to your customers. Your customers can protect their own data on the edge. That saves a lot of operating expense for the company. And effectively, this is a quote from, one of our market makers, who's using POR in the military. We're able to cut TCP/IP in half because we're pre-validating everything from the edge, and the reception of data is the final step, not the initial step. I really admire Vince Cerf, your team, and everyone associated with TCP/IP. But we're kind of building off the paradigm of TCP/IP, which was invented in 1974, where proof of reception has a variety of new innovations on top of TCP/IP, because instead of a third-party server, confirming data packets, now we can have our edge computing on our devices to be able to leverage POR. And honestly, proof of reception wasn't possible in the 1980s when TCP/IP was commercialized, because unfortunately our edge devices at the time, they didn't have much computing, they didn't have much energy, and as you can see here, now our edge devices are multiple times these supercomputers. So it's really an opportune invention that really only works in this era in history because our edge devices have computing, but currently they're just sitting idle while these third-party services are charging us, taking our data, and creating time delay and security vulnerabilities. Now we can secure everything on the edge locally with our port and our portraits on our device. Here's kind of a technical kind of explanation in terms of how proof of reception compares to TCP/IP. So within TCP/IP, everything is kind of a unilateral data transfer, as you can see here, just sending data packets to whomever, whenever, without any authentication or validation. Within POR, we can pre-validate all the conditions, and then the packet transfer is the last step. So we kind of pre-validate, and then finally the reception is the last step. So everything is kind of compressed into one step versus 3 steps. And that's where we come with this statistic where we can cut TCP/IP in half. Now, if you imagine TCP/IP being cut in half across every transaction online, we're cutting the internet compute in half, we're cutting the electricity in half, we're cutting the pollution in half. Furthermore, other solutions that corporations are able to benefit from proof of reception is better cybersecurity. Once again, if the corporation is not storing the validation or the data on their customers, hackers have nothing to exploit anymore. And it's not worth their resources to go into an individual micro validation when they don't know what that validation is all about. So essentially, we're able to reduce cybersecurity costs. We're able to effectively remove payment processing because the bank transfer can now confirm the payment going through and the good or service being exchanged. We can also create edge consumer loyalty directly between a customer and their company. So now you can kind of have this secure history of transactions between your customer and award credit for certain items and certain rewards. And finally, we can also help companies save money on payroll services. So now that with POR, an employee can self-validate the work they've done, maybe GPS from their phone confirms when they came into the office because it's the same location at the office. And then you can also program portraits so that payroll tax and other deductions are sent to the tax authorities in real time. And in our early discussions with different accounting firms, they think this is revolutionary as well. So in the future, we also want to provide real-time accounting so that come April, we don't need to reconcile and think back to what did we do in the beginning of the year. We can kind of have real-time accounting, real-time taxation, real-time transparency and compliance as well. Now, in terms of how proof of reception is implemented, it's really very seamless. When people think about proof of reception, they kind of worry, like, is this a brand new paradigm? Is this an app? Is this a platform? We are just a binary code that you can retrofit as a software patch into any existing application layer or presentation layer. So here's an example of proof of reception being installed into the camera app of your phone. So in this use case, proof of reception of a certain image will create an instantaneous point of sale. So proof of reception of that image can now kind of create this point of sale. And then my voice ID, which is unique to me, it's a biometric, can say, I want to buy that jacket. And then proof of reception can enable money from my bank account to go to that vendor and allow that vendor to send that shipment out to me. So here's kind of an example of how we're being implemented at the application layer. Earlier this year, we also demonstrated proof of reception at the network layer, specifically pre-installing our code base into hardware processors, such as this GreenWaves chip, GAP9, created by Global Foundries, where now we can enable different devices to come pre-installed with proof of reception. So to kind of highlight some examples, when a camera comes pre-installed with that GAP9 port, now the camera can become its own transaction network where a camera can confirm proof of reception of certain images over time. Let's say a license plate entering and leaving a parking establishment, and that can charge the customer's account in real time to send money to the parking lot. So you don't need to have a parking attendant or these machines any longer. Also, EV charging, it's very antiquated, and some charging stations, payment systems are very clunky and sometimes break down. Edge validation of the EV charge, tied to the VIN number of that car, can automatically, charge kilowatt per hour directly from the bank account of the customer. And we also are exploring use cases with chips that come in, these wearable devices like headphones, where from the edge you can confirm, what is the consumption of specific content, and the money can, the publishing royalty can go directly to that content owner as well. However, what's taken up most of our attention in the past year is securing the edge infrastructure for our Department of Defense. So right now, I'm sure you've kind of heard the headlines that Chinese and Russian hackers are kind of sitting at the doorstep of our US infrastructure. And in many instances, they're able to enter the door very easily. Well, with proof of reception, with our edge validation, we're enabling warfighters and other authorized personnel to validate, their biometric and other unique credentials on the edge, and that kind of prevents the gateway for these hackers to enter our infrastructure by us creating intranets or mesh networks, within different telecoms. So, working with one of our market makers, Mobile N, we're able to create kind of closed networks within existing telcos like Verizon and AT&T. So previously, where data needed to go through third-party, validation through servers and different systems and API calls and hops, now a warfighter, upon proof of reception of their unique credential, can access the data directly from the input source. And accuracy and speed is always, a priority for the Department of Defense, especially, in a battlefield environment. We also are starting to work with space development agencies and different satellite manufacturers to install ports within the hardware of satellites. Previously, to POR, every satellite needs to be controlled by ground station, but because satellites constantly orbit the Earth, ground station has a limited purview of every satellite. So rather than that, now a ground station can use portraits tied to a data packet, can create different portraits saying they want this data packet to reach this location, it requires this much capacity. If you want to kind of create a payment system where you can start renting bandwidth from other satellites online and have a shared economy for idle satellites that are doing nothing. And you can also kind of create credentials where you can only transfer that data packet on allies or satellites that are friendly to us instead of adversaries. So now we're able to kind of create a new way of edge validation across satellites to create a new dimension in terms of peer-to-peer data transfer. In terms of ESGs, with my work at the UN, I've kind of realized that there's a lot of limitations in terms of how ESGs have been previously validated. One option is geospatial ESG. However, the limitations and challenges of that is data quality, cost, and ethical issues. They're literally spying on populations that haven't provided their consent. Furthermore, the other alternative is third-party ESG reporting. However, the countries that report on themselves, they naturally have a conflict of interest, to make the current administration look better than it really is. So you have data quality, cost delays, and human error. Now, as I mentioned earlier, every kind of human has access to a device. They say on average, 6 devices, but we only need 1 device for POR. So our vision is to allow every human to become their own port via their personal devices, portion ESG data from the bottom up, and then include, their human consent, for whatever data they input, their biometric credential to prove that, it is authentic, location, time, create unlimited portraits. And then now a large corporate institution, instead of paying a third-party ESG validator, they can pay, billions of dollars of their marketing spend or whatever goodwill budget they have directly to these people who are inputting all these values on the edge. As another use case, we also work within the United Nations in terms of last mile supply chain. This is myself and Cindy McCain, the executive director of the World Food Program, where in the last mile, there's no kind of sophisticated data infrastructure to keep track of the supply chain. Well, every person along the supply chain has a device where they can install a port. So let's say a raw material is provided, being delivered from the field. Unless there's proof of reception of that delivery by the manufacturer, the raw material supplier doesn't get paid for that raw material. So by providing and incentivizing good behavior where proof of reception of service is the only way to unlock payment, we're able to create edge validation of supply chain in a very efficient, sustainable, and secure manner. Currently, there's a lot of greenwashing, billions of dollars of carbon credits being sold, and they're all bogus carbon credits. So we do also have another subset of POR called VAPOR, which stands for Validation Pollution Removal, where edge validation of, let's say, carbon capture or some other, green activity can be purchased directly from the bank accounts of oil and gas companies and other institutions that need to offset emissions. Finally, within the world of capital markets, I'm in New York. I have a Wharton finance degree, so I know all about the inefficiencies in capital markets. Normally, there's a custodian, transfer agent, some type of third party that validates the reception of cash for the reception of title or ownership of an asset. In our case, we can allow the reception of cash along with KYC, identity, and all these different validation requirements via portraits on the edge to transfer title of real estate, commodities, equities, and virtually any product in an instantaneous, secure basis. In terms of international money transfer, this is also some of the solutions we're implementing for some of the SIDS or small island developing states. The status quo is kind of this very intricate third-party validation system. Let me just walk you through a simple illustration of how POR would work. So let's imagine two different countries and the sender-receiver in two different countries. Now let's say that within each country, POR is able to set up a local bank account, or our market makers have a local bank account, and we have a lot of clients that have millions of dollars in cash reserves. But essentially, let's say there's $1 million in country A and $1 million in country B. So instead of this intricate process of validation, the sender sends $500 with the receiver credentials, and then that money is received within country A. The money never crosses the SWIFT network, but the separate bank account in country B can now remit that money to the receiver that validates the credential. So if that receiver validates that credential, it could be a passcode, it could be their biometric, what have you. Now the local bank account can send money locally to that recipient. So as long as we have, enough liquidity and enough balance in two different accounts, we can create all these different interoperable money remittance solutions. But let's say that the sender is kind of skeptical. It's a family member, and last time they sent $500, the receiver didn't use it for something beneficial. They used it to party. Just a simple example. Now the sender can not only send $50 and the receiver credential, they can specify the merchant ID tied to let's say a supermarket, the product SKU tied to a specific product, let's say rice, and then the time limit in which the receiver needs to validate it. So now the receiver cannot just receive the money for anything. They have to go to a grocery at a local supermarket. They have to get their groceries at a local supermarket within a certain time limit, or they can't eat. So we're providing, a new dimension of transaction customization, where you can send portraits in one country and you can receive portions if you validate those portraits in another country. We also are starting to expand this with early adopters, like in Colombia, where Schneider is from, where we're working with different produce manufacturers to help them do cross-border transactions to receive money for avocados, emeralds, and even coffee. And then we also are starting to grow our presence in the Middle East. I work with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and PIF, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and providing internal money remittance solutions so that if money is received in their New York bank account, internally that could release money in their foreign accounts as well. Another area where we see a lot of early adoption is in the world of medical data. So currently, prior to POR, our personal data is siloed into different repositories or EHRs, electronic healthcare records, depending on the provider. Well, now through edge validation of our consent, be it through biometric or some other credential, we can allow our personal records in one repository to be interoperable with another repository. So if we go to a new doctor, we don't have to fill out those paper forms. We can just have the data from one repository transferred to another on the edge. We can take it a step further, and we can even reward and monetize patients for data validation on the edge. Currently, due to HIPAA and other data compliance standards, big pharma and other healthcare marketers are becoming more and more cognizant and more cautious in terms of how they source data. So instead of these shady data lakes, which are collecting data illegally sometimes, from different data pools, now companies and marketers like Compass is one of the companies in our network. They administer $1 billion of marketing spend for big pharma companies, and they want to license real-time insights that are consented directly from patients for different marketing campaigns, maybe clinical trials and so forth and so on. We could provide the patient with a monetization of their data profile directly with the marketing budgets of these marketers as well. Now, we also are exploring different things with governments. Obviously, they're kind of slow to adapt, but within New York City, where I'm based, here's an example where we're starting to kind of introduce POR to the Department of Sanitation, where, as you probably heard in the headlines, New York City has a homelessness and migrant problem. Well, why not allow those people and empower them to use their humanity to do something beneficial for society and be rewarded for doing that? So what we're introducing is, IoT trash cans that have some type of biometric confirmation, where homeless and migrants, they might not even have money, so their identity is their wallet. They can confirm how much trash they dispose off the ground. The trash receptor can confirm that weight of that trash, tie it to their identity, and then they can get food, medicine, and clothing, for that goodwill that they're generating. Now, at a high level, we have the nonprofit called the Web Trinity Foundation, mandated with freeing, empower, and protecting the personal data, time, and skills of 8 billion humans around the world. It acts as a treasury and mints these ports. These ports are, unique assets for global distribution. And the way that we're able to sustain ourselves is we're able to generate tax-exempt donations from market makers. The way that we've qualified for our 501c3 status is because our mission is literally, global human rights. It's really to save all humanity from online trafficking, which is wrong. Now, in terms of our for-profit side, we do work with different corporate entities that want to pre-lease these ports, and then they're able to create cash flow by licensing and marketing these retail ports for different geographies and different industries. And it's a simple SaaS license that they're able to monetize. However, they're able to offset that profit, 25% of their taxable income, by donating it directly back to the foundation, so we can continue to do our humanitarian use cases as well. And kind of what we're trying to launch, in the coming year is, this new operating system, which we call Portable, where with codeless programming, now you can leverage, small language models on the edge to create text prompts. So rather than using text prompts for like ChatGPT and, creating, random outputs like, a student that wants to trick their history teacher, we're kind of providing, real actionable inputs and outputs. So if I'm a fan and Esco, I'm the artist, Esco on the other end, I could just type, Esco, I would like to pour my $1 for your song, Beautiful Lady. If I accept that, or if I'm pre-programmed to accept that, it allows the $1 to go from the fan's account to my bank account and allows the song to be consumable by the fan. Now, we can do this for a limited amount of use cases where your text, you can literally program your transactions now without having any computer science background, just by text messaging or using your voice. You saw the example earlier with charitable contributions. Let's say the donor is able to pour the donation, the money, with different conditions like biometric ID and location, and the refugee that can validate that portrait gets the donation directly to their account. Capital markets, an investor can say, I want to pour this asset with this term, and the issuer that provides that validation can receive that money or that asset. And just generically, you can pour any portion with any portraits and have another counterparty pour that portraits for that portion. So thank you so much, everyone, for your proof of reception during this time. I know your time is very valuable, but literally, we've been doing POR this whole time. Your proof of reception has been the validation, and hopefully it made sense. And I'm so excited to get your feedback and work with you however you're open to collaborating to provide a free internet for all, literally behind the computer screen.
Thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive, thoughtful unpack of your framework, right?
Yes.
It is really kind of a remarkable set of interlocking components.
Yes.
I have lots of commentary in chat from Ben Konsinski. I have Mark Prensky making a comment. We're going to get to those in a moment. I want to remind everyone we're at the bottom of our first hour. So we're going into overtime, right, to 1 o'clock. And if you want to participate in our Q&A, delighted to have you stay with us. So first to Ben, let's have you join us. Quite a few comments that you have about proof of reception. So jump in, Ben.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great, great discussion and very comprehensive and expansive. And I threw in a range of stream of consciousness as you were going along. So I don't even recall all elements of it, but a general theme is I'm envisioning a layered stack of elements that are on top of the existing infrastructure. You don't conflict with it. You're layering on top. It is low power, low content exchange. So your minimal content exchange. My concern on the credentialing thing, and I'd certainly like to hear a little bit more about it. I separate authentication and attestation. Who are you and what rights do you have? And when we talk credentialing, it's more like I got the ticket, don't ask me anything more. And I don't know necessarily that you are individually authenticated, but I do know you have permission to do what you say you're going to do. I got the ticket. And so I need to get a little more. I very much like the whole pattern of opportunity for disintermediation of traditional high friction intermediaries, high latency activities that are apart. And also you can more fairly deal with distribution of margin and benefits as well. But anyway, that's just a shotgun of some of the thoughts that came to mind.
Yes, and to kind of address your point about authentication, so I think a lot of the hardware manufacturers have allowed us to store our biometric locally on a chip on our phone called a security enclave. So essentially, we do not handle the biometric unless we're mandated to do that. But essentially, the local biometric, like for example, when you open your phone on iPhone, some people opt for Face ID. That local authentication that whoever may have validated that Face ID is the one that originally calibrated with that phone, is providing the edge validation that the original owner of that phone is indeed that person on the receiving end of this data packet before the content is transferred.
Absolutely. And that also speaks to the notion of local first, or local as much as possible.
Correct.
And that also then speaks to the knowledge set, the SLM, as
Yeah.
much as possible, bring only what is needed
Yep.
as close as possible to.
Correct. And that's why I like the people-centered internet, because all of us have DNA inside of us, and our face is a manifestation of that, even though we can't see the DNA within us. So that's kind of the biological metaphor that I put there.
Given the quality of voice generation, I'm getting a little more skeptical on on the voice
But
recognition.
that's why we can overlay additional portraits, as I called it, in addition to the unique location of that individual, along with additional credentialing, maybe a cash reception to confirm that that bank account is associated with that person. So that's the beauty of POR, where it's not just one and done or two-factor authentication. It's multi-factor authentication at the edge that only you can uniquely do in a logical way.
One last comment, and that is I was reflecting on M-Pesa in Africa and Aadhaar in India, and looking at those steps that were sort of halfway on the principal direction you're talking about. And we certainly have a perception from our people-centered standpoint of allocation of rights of choice by the individual, and how do we execute on that, the control mechanisms that are a security as a part of it, and also compensation that we expect should be a fair apportionment as well. Have you reflected on some of those infrastructures maybe that could have a huge boost by this?
Yeah, definitely. So I think People Connect the Internet is affiliated with Nick Brown, who created the Visa debit system as well. I'm working with him as well to kind of take legacy infrastructure and allow interoperability of all these customizations. Our data and our humanity is the raw material, is the fuel of the global economy. So now you can kind of create these different portraits or these contract requirements around how your data is consumed, and only let it be consumed by those that validate your requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Outstanding. So I'm going to invite Mark Prinsky to join us. He had a comment or perhaps two in the chat. Mark?
Unmute myself. Okay, I think I have done that. Good morning.
I see Mr. Dan there. Mr. Dan is the one that introduced me to Nick Brown. So thank you, Mr. Dan, and thank you, Snyder, for connecting me with Mr. Dan. Sorry about that. Yeah.
So this is wonderful. I hope it works out. It's certainly something that people need. My concern is whenever you have something like this, you got the bad guys who are doing it. And so the question I put in chat is, how much have you red teamed this? How much have you put this in front of the hacker community and said, oh, by the way, we have our own greed, we have our own greed and graft are the biggest things that run the world economically in many places. And so how much have you done to not enable those things, and to not enable the people who have greed and graft to use the system to their own benefit?
Sure. So just to kind of clarify, I sit at the R&D level and at the level of education for this new protocol, but we do have market makers, which I alluded to earlier, that have a lot of sophisticated use cases. So MobileN, which I referred to earlier, is providing a post-quantum encrypted network for JSOC, the elite, Delta forces of the Department of Defense. And, they've kind of started to integrate POR with, some of those stress tests, if you will. But my reason for being here today is to expand, kind of the red team, blue team, kind of back testing, of this protocol. But I would like to kind of just say in a nutshell, innately within our design, we remove the incentive for hackers to even be motivated to infiltrate a microtransaction on the edge. we take it a step further by sometimes obfuscating the location of these ports. So that's where mobile lens technology comes in. With data in transit, we don't know where those values are coming from, where they're sent, because we're able to obfuscate the locations of the sender and the receiver, and only the sender and the receiver have a unique credential to unlock the locations. So long story short, some of our underlying market makers have and continue to use different approaches of red team hacks and haven't been able to kind of break through it. But from my point of view, number one, we'd love to work with you if you do have access to those testing procedures. And secondly, we remove the incentive for hackers to even want to hack a port, because it's such a minimal type of validation, and the value is not lying within that port. It's lying in what the port can authenticate within your banking network, which is already super secure by the banking institutions and their cybersecurity experts. So yeah, thank you for that question, and we'd love to stress test this with you and anyone else.
And if I can go one question further,
Sure.
Kevin, can I?
Go right ahead. Yes.
There's one market which is all the small transactions and all the people-to-people transactions, and that obviously is a big amount of money. The other thing is, Putin is the richest guy in the world, they say. And a lot of people are accumulating huge amounts of money, corporations included, through means that I wonder if this controls.
I think so. I mean, because whatever has happened to date, obviously we can't retrofit the protocol onto that. But moving forward, if any money transfer is pre-programmed with a portraits confirming that only this utility of the money can be done. Like, for example, in the previous example where I'm sending money to my cousin overseas and the money can only be used for groceries, or the money can only be unlocked by my cousin's validation of their identity. Like, these types of portraits on top of the value transfer ultimately and hopefully will alleviate a lot of this stuff happening in the dark web, or with all these kind of money laundering schemes.
I hope it works. Good luck. This is great.
Thank you.
So, question. You've alluded to, hey, PCI, this is interesting in our community. Many times we ask someone who joins us, so we'll ask you,
Yes,
what do you need, right? Because this is pretty ambitious.
yes,
I would say, although the patent is sitting on the side of simplicity,
yes.
the applications that are, many. All right. So what is it that you need at this stage? Because I think that the ambition here obscures the starting point that could actually be, you have so many things happening simultaneously that you're imagining. It needs a tip of the arrow, all right? And what is that? And what is it that you imagine you need from PCI, or that you need to be connected with, right?
Sure.
In our community.
And thank you for that generous question. I'm really honored to be here and very humbled. And I'm just fortunate that something I dreamed about in 2021 has gotten this far, so I could be in front of all of you. I really want to benchmark TCP/IP in the 1980s in terms of how it was adopted wide scale, because I'm not a traditional computer scientist, or I'm not tied in with DARPA. I have my own limitations, but if we could just kind of benchmark how TCP/IP became the foundational layer of the internet, and we start from kind of that academic or that government or public sector approach, that would be kind of the high level strategy that I'm thinking of, and I believe that all of you can enable some part of that. Secondly, I want POR to really benefit your community. So whether it's providing you with means of donating my IP to you, and whoever is an expert in a certain vertical can spearhead the adoption of POR in that vertical and generate licensing revenue for themselves or for your organization. I think that's something that I would love to expand upon, and figure out, what is the low-hanging fruit, what are the problems that we can solve, and what is a kind of a proper path forward to incentivize everyone and just provide a more free internet and more people-centered internet, literally. Yeah.
Okay. Schneider, I brought you back into the conversation. My point of view is that this could be introduced as an enabler of some of the things that we've looked at. We've had quite a few conversations about work that we've been doing in Puerto Rico, right? As Sean, do you prefer Sean or Scott? You tell me which, or
Yeah,
Esco.
it's
What do you
Esco.
want?
Esco or Sean is up to you.
Okay, well, I'll go with Esco since that's on your screen.
Thank you.
But that is a proof of concept, slice of humanity, right?
Yes.
We've observed that Puerto Rico has tried to build infrastructure over and over again, not successfully, right? And trying to create connective tissue, that there's a large difference between what's happening in the larger city and what's happening as you move out into the rural part of Puerto Rico. And it seems to me that what you're talking about here is could be a piece of the puzzle. All right, we don't know. All right, and there are other places that we've done that kind of extension. So I have Schneider is part of this PCI community team.
Yes.
Suzanne Sienkiewicz was on earlier, and we'll bring it to the attention of Lynn Wells, who is part of our team, who also sits on the board of advisors for. So thank you for those asks.
Yes.
Seems reasonable, rational.
Yes.
Again, as a person that had responsibility for managing the IBM brand and some of its assets over a long period of time, I would try to get your message focused.
Yes.
Right, so that something is being left behind, right, that is memorable, right?
Yeah.
I think that we could have a conversation. I'll try to set it up, because
Thank you so
I think
much.
that would help you, move from, I could walk away with great ambition here.
Yes.
But I'm not motivated to know what I should be doing, right? And that's what I want to help with. I see other folks, some thoughtful people, who have joined us. Gary, can you hear me? I'm going to ask you to join us. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. I mean, you are a large collector of data in a lot of ways. Do you see any way that first tell Esco what you're interested in, all right, in the world, and then do you see any connective tissue between what you do and what he's trying to accomplish?
I study health information dissemination online and through a variety of different channels for addressing health risks, such as pandemics and other major events. And we have a huge problem right now with misinformation spreading online and worse, disinformation. And so I was really intrigued by your ideas of safeguarding the internet and trying to identify and limit participation by bad actors. I think we really definitely need more of that. So I really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, I look forward to teaming up with you. And the reason I shared, such a wide, extensive list of use cases is, I didn't know who I was going to speak with. So, now Gary knows the medical use case and he has proof of reception of that. Now we can, break out and solve that issue. And I want to do everything with everyone here. So that's why, we're more of like a TCP/IP is used as a protocol for everything. And that's why PO are so vast. But I would love to have a more targeted call with you, Kevin, and you know, focus on, you know, what you feel is a priority. So thank you for all of your feedback. Yeah.
Outstanding. Gary, keep doing good work, my friend.
Yes.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for being with us.
Thank you for hosting this, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I would love to connect with you. I don't know if there's a contact list or anything, or you can reach out to me. I saw Schneider sent my link. You know, feel free to email me or, you know, contact me however you'd like.
I think you can get me on the email list on the
Okay.
on the interaction. So I'm glad to connect with you.
Thank you so much. We're here to serve. Yeah.
And we had some requests in chat. It was actually in private with me, so you won't see it show up in the public chat. If you'll be sharing your charts, right?
Yes, I'm happy to do so.
So if you would share those with Schneider
Okay.
and with me, we'll make sure that those get out to you know, the folks.
And I believe this video will also be shared with everyone as
Yes, it
well,
will.
which will have the screenshots of the slides, but I'll provide a separate PDF as well. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes what's showing up on the screen in
Yes.
detail,
Of
it's
course.
just better to be able to see the native chart, okay, on a full screen.
Understood. Understood.
And just showing interest. That's
Yes.
great.
Yes.
Ben, you put some more thoughts into chat after you left our last discussion, so come back in.
Again, I've been doing a streaming a variety of comments. I'm not exactly sure which which part mattered.
Your
So
most
I
recent
do.
talk about you know, adoption of TCP and journaling assets and events.
Yeah, I was thinking from the standpoint of Puerto Rican that that we can use it to leverage the approach to create a hygiene on the processes. I think one of the things we've seen was separate processes that they're very unhygienic, and we excuse our failures on that, and we have no journaling, no record, no transaction of assets and events that are a part of it, no validation or assertion of it. I come back to the issue, one of the initial issues in looking at blockchain structures in quite a number of years ago, on the aspect of Syrian refugees leaving, not having a valid record because of their properties that they vacated, and that the trust is in the record by the government, which was corrupted later and lost to that. But so we needed to create immutable exchange, immutable records along the way, along the path, and art provenance in France as well, and other factors like that, which sort of drove some of the interest in the immutable records. But if I attend to record immutability with an authentication, I can, I'm in essence, I have digital assets as well as people that are certified. The asset itself, the event, the record of it, any is a part of, can be credentialed itself, and therefore a part of record. But that's about saving things. I want to talk about destroying things too. And that is, if I'm going local first, and prefer the content to be as ephemeral as need be, meaning that that whatever we collect that facilitates the security and trust of a transaction does not need to have to be immortal, and certainly portions of that should not be necessarily immortal. And it seems like your protocols accommodate that kind of thing, that I retain what is needed,
Correct.
but and I use what is needed in that process, but I don't need to retain.
Yes, exactly. Like you mentioned, and you rightly use the word portion as well. The value is only live for the session of the transaction. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
also, I'm glad you picked Puerto Rico as a potential use case. I'm very tied in with the wealthiest local family there. So they have a lot of infrastructure that can potentially be a use case for whatever we want to build there. It's the Fonelladas family. They own the largest shopping mall there and the dairy company and other assets where I'm sure they'd be ecstatic to work with an organization like yours.
All right. Well, we're coming up to the top of the hour. Let me just see, are there any other questions before we conclude today? I don't see any hands. I don't see anything in chat. So, Esko, thank you so much for
Thank you.
generously sharing your concept, proof of reception. Schneider, thank you for bringing Esko to our attention and to the community. We will follow up. What you're asking for seems like it has mutual benefit,
Yes.
across the boundaries, and that's always a good thing. It's the spirit of why PCI exists.
Thank you.
So with that, do you have any concluding comments that you'd like to make, Esko, before we conclude?
Just like I do at every call, thank you for your proof of reception.
All right. And thank you for your generosity. And for everyone here, thank you for being intentional, for being with us.
Thank you so much.
In everything you do. Ask better questions. Cheers. Bye-bye
Thank you.
now.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.